Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to kick off talking about flesh eater courts. I know a little bit about these guys already, and from what I know, they seem like one of the more inspired ideas from Age of Sigmar, so we'll see if what I've heard is accurate, and if you guys like them as well. From the maelstrom of a sundered world, the 8 realms were born. The formless and the divine exploded into life. Strange new worlds appeared in the firmament, each one gilded with spirits, gods, and men. Noblest of the gods was Sigmar. For years beyond reckoning he illuminated the realms, wreathed in light and majesty as he carved out his reign. His strength was the power of thunder, his wisdom was infinite. Mortal and immortal alike kneeled before his lofty throne. Great empires rose, and, for a while, treachery was banished. Sigmar claimed the land and sky as his own, and ruled over a glorious age of myth. But cruelty is tenacious. As had been foreseen, the great alliance of gods and men tore itself apart. Myth and legend crumbled into chaos. Darkness flooded the realms. Torture, slavery, and fear replaced the glory that came before. Sigmar turned his back on the mortal kingdoms, disgusted by their fate. He fixed his gaze instead on the remains of the world he had lost long ago, brooding over its charred core, searching endlessly for a sign of hope. And then, in the dark heat of his rage, he caught a glimpse of something magnificent. He pictured a weapon born of the heavens, a beacon powerful enough to pierce the endless night, an army hewn from everything he had lost. Sigmar set his artisans to work, and for long ages they toiled, striving to harness the power of the stars. As Sigmar's great work neared completion, he turned back to the realms and saw that the dominion of chaos was almost complete. The hour for vengeance had come. Finally, with lightning blazing across his brow, he stepped forth to unleash his creation. The Age of Sigmar had begun. Listen well to the tale of the rot-skinned king and his darksome court. From the weft and weave of war he came, claws a-scrabbling over fallow fields, thick with crawling flies and milky-eyed dead. Alongside the fine king, his lordly courtiers did prance, scenting the air for morbid smells. Pale of skin and wild of eye were they, seeking out the promise of riches to be had. They danced a jaunty path through the grave digger's garden. What blade and axe had planted, hungry claws harvested for their king and his subjects. The foolish and the desperate heeded the Dark King's call, starving wretches eager to sell their souls, impatient for a chance to partake of the king's table of fleshy morsels. For a full belly they came, their minds already embracing the king's madness, if only to live a day longer. Maybe they knew, and maybe not, but to take even a bite from that creature's plate was to be forever damned. once stood fair and honest peoples, there now were servants of the wrought-skinned king. Reason, like a setting sun, faded from their eyes, replaced with an endless night of madness. And so the court grew and grew, its hissing, cackling courtiers herding a tide of fresh-made ghouls. Those who sought to thwart or hide from them met the same fate. All were overwhelmed by frenzied cannibals, caught up in the delusion of their master. Flesh-eater courts. Hidden among the ruins of the mortal realms thrive the flesh-eater courts. Bound by the madness of their abhorrent ghoul kings, throngs of mordants live out their pitiful lives, feasting upon the corpses provided by the endless war and strife of kingdom after kingdom. In every corner of the realms, nightmarish tales are told of the flesh-eater courts. When war and famine ravage a land, its most desperate and determined people survive in any way they can. Giving in to hunger, they turn upon the fallen, the weak, and even each other in their quest for sustenance. Retreating into the shadowed ruins of their towns and cities, these cannibal cults devolve into hideous parodies of society, kept alive on a diet of rancid flesh and bone. Even then, these creatures are worthy of pity, for their transformation into ghouls is not yet complete. Only once a cannibal partakes of an abhorrent king's feast do they become what is known as a mordant. The kings themselves are bestial vampires who rule over swaths of the mortal realms by the strength of their ragged courts. Completely delusional, they have become known as abhorrents by the rest of their blood-sucking kin. Abhorrent ghoul kings are so lost in their madness that they believe themselves to be mortal monarchs. When they come to a place infested with cannibals, they see not monsters, but starving peasants and soldiers eager for the hand of a beneficent master. Each abhorrent king brings with him more than just dark rulership. They also spread their contagious madness. Weak minds are quickly turned, but even the strong-willed soon see the king as he sees himself. Before long, those that once hid in shame from the light stand tall, armored in delusion. In a mockery of civilization, the king brings them into his court, dubbing the pale horrors that bow and scrap before him his mordants. By the will of the abhorrents do the flesh-eater courts congregate in the realms. Gathering up feasts from among the living and the dead, they rend apart their enemies and prepare the fallen's flesh for their lord's culinary pleasure. Some among the mordants might even be blessed to sup the king's blood, in their minds drinking wine from their master's table. However, the thick, crimson draughts bring with it a terrifying transformation. These creatures arise as drooling horrors, slaved utterly to their new master, and bereft of what remained of their sanity. In time, a few of these blessed ones might even ascend from mordants to join the vampire ranks of the abhorrents, and if fortune favors them, in turn found their own courts, thus spreading the madness of the flesh-eaters. drove his sword up to its hilt into the monster's stomach. The horrific thing hissed and spat at him, lashing out with filth-encrusted claws that sparked off Bergren's armor. "You are a curse upon creation," growled Bergren, feeling nothing but disgust for these craven creatures. With a boot, he heaved the dying beast off his blade, causing an arc of gore to spray out like a red fountain. On all sides, the sound of combat filled the air. Bergren's men at arms battled with cannibal beasts, his soldiers' brightly colored tabards spattered with rancid blood as they stove in skulls and opened bellies with their axes and blades. "Show no mercy, men," he screamed, charging once more. Somehow he had lost his blade, but it mattered not, and he seized another creature. This close, he could see the naked terror in the thing's eyes. Leaning in, Bergren wrapped armored fingers around its neck. "Please," it gasped, but he was hardly listening. Not even the glimpsed reflection of red eyes and fangs in his victim's gaze was enough to stop what came next. The Carrion King. From ancient vampire bloodlines were the first abhorrent kings spawned. Shunned by their kin for their cannibalistic ways, they scattered out into the realms, weaving trails of madness through the ruins left by the Age of Chaos, and becoming the first generation of abhorrent Ghoul kings. The origins of the Abhorrents are an ancient and tragic tale. During the Age of Myth, the first Abhorrent roamed the realms. He was a favored servant of Nagash, and back then he was fair and strong. His court of knights and nobles rode resplendent as glorious children of the night. He was known by many names in many lands. Sumeros, Summer King, the Blood Rose Prince, and Usharon the Handsome, to name but a few. Though the truth of his descent into delusion has been lost to the march of time, it is believed by many that the king fell out of favor with Nagash and was cursed with a hideous transformation. Malformed and filled with anger against his former master, the king became a monster like no other that prowled the nightlands of Shyish. Such was the devastation spread by the king's fury that scores of Nagash's kingdoms were destroyed, their lords slain, their peoples torn apart, and their cities reduced to naught but ruins and broken corpses. Angered by the king's excesses, Nagash imprisoned his wayward servant in a prison called the Shroud Cage. A towering edifice of broken promises, its walls reflected every lie the king had ever told back upon him, reducing him to a raving wreck, as twisted in mind as he was in body. So the king might have stayed for all eternity, had not the god king Sigmar intervened. In the first years of the Age of Chaos, Sigmar invaded the realm of death, incensed by Nagash's perceived betrayal at the All Points. During Sigmar's rampage through the great necromancer's domain, his armies unwittingly brought down the great bastion that held the Shroud Cage, and from its ruins scuttled forth the thing that would become known as the Carrion King. Loosed into the shadows, the Carrion King began to build his court once more, in lost and depraved mortal cannibals known as Mordants, the Carrion King found a willing source of servants. With his blood he created the Sycophants to sing his praises from the foot of his dark throne, and these in turn went on to create their own courts. King Gloomheart of the Yearning Courts. Pieces of Gloomheart's mind are missing. He does not remember much before waking among the Yearning Courts, except that he was a great warrior, savaged by a terrible beast. Such must have been the case, for he woke, clad in his questing armor, blade in hand, the fang marks fresh upon his neck. As he got to his feet, a throng of courtiers prostrated themselves on all sides. Since that fateful day, Gloomheart has been seeking the monster that almost killed him. Riding on the back of his spectacular solar dragon, Berosus, the king has scoured the Gallow Deeps, Nightlands, and the Wraith Weirds. In his crusade to find the elusive monster that wounded him, countless great beasts have ended their days upon the feasting tables of the Yearning Courts. A few times Gloomheart has even glimpsed his prey, but always reflected for a moment in the eyes of dying men, or the sheen of blood-splattered armor. And so his hunt continues. So it is that each flesh-eater court is a reflection of that first court, their abhorrent kings trying to recreate in madness the memories passed on to them through blood. Many of those beasts closest to the Carrion King still live within the ruins of his ancient kingdom, deep within Sheesh. In them the blood of the king is strong, and their collective delusion feeds off and permeates the land. The further from these ruinous cities and empires the courts stray, the thinner the Carrion King's blood becomes, though the madness remains undiminished. Doubtless, long after the king's tale has been forgotten, fragments of his story will live on in the flesh-eater courts, a dark pantomime played out endlessly across the ages of the mortal realms. As to the fate of the Carrion King, nothing is known save that Nagash still seeks him across the mortal realms. "Come closer, bloodlings," bade the vampire, "and hear the dark tale of the Blood Rose Prince, first of the Abhorrent Kings. Our base brothers were not always as they are now, savage beasts that feed upon rancid leavings of battle that even the lowliest necromancer would scorn. Many are the legends of our bestial cousins, but they all come back to the first of their kind, the Soul-Blight King who once held the favor of Neferata. Some say he was one of the missing Mortarchs, others just another blood-born lord. Whatever the truth, he was one of the first vampires, a prince of the night as we are today, blessed with true immortality by the great necromancer. Strong and swift was he, able to tear a Trogoth in twain with a single mighty tear, or dodge a bloodthirster's blade with effortless grace. With his monstrous strength came hubris beyond measure. Some will tell you he thought to challenge Nagash for dominance, others that he took to feeding on our kind. But these are the reports of the desperately misinformed. In truth, it was the ire of our blessed Queen Neferata that brought the prince low. As the more dark of blood reveals to her champions, he betrayed her. His terrible vanity was such that he thought he could spurn her with impunity. So it was she cursed him with his horrific visage and his hunger for flesh, a timely lesson for any among you that would cross our great queen. Courts of Delusion. Just as in any mortal court, an abhorrent king's followers are each assigned a station under his beneficent rule. Lords and courtiers rule over soldiers, servants, and peasants, all mordants accepting their role within the infectious madness of their masters. To look upon a flesh-eater court from the outside, one might mistake it for a nest of cannibalism and horror. Mordants root around in piles of reeking dead, their filthy claws picking decaying meat from rancid bones, while they snarl and spit at each other in a guttural tongue. Mobs of towering crypt horrors, haunters, and their kin loom in the shadows like deathless guardians, darting into the press of ghouls to claim whole corpses at will. In the midst of this pit of monsters sits the abhorrent Ghoul King upon a throne of mortal remains. Tall and powerful, everything about the king screams that he is a bestial predator, from his lithe, corded muscles to the dark hunger in his inhuman gaze. However, this is not what the king and his followers see. To the king, he sits upon a gilt throne in a great hall. Next to him, his men-at-arms stand to attention or spar, ready for the call to war. Servants scurry about, preparing another feast for their lord, or attending to the running of the kingdom. Within the madness of a flesh-eater court, each has their role. The king is lord and master of all, standing at the head of the hierarchy. Sometimes he might create other abhorrents to share in this glory, though they usually remain subservient to the king's desires. These other abhorrents are known as Sycophants, and can range from a single heir to the throne to a whole brood of bloodsuckers, taking on the roles and titles of the king's doting family. For example, the Giblet Prince is the heir apparent and closest to his king. The awful queen oversees the blood nurseries, caring for the newest of the brood, and making sure they feed regularly on the red bounty their father provides. Then there are the sweet-bred princelings, chosen companions of the Giblet Prince, who are charged by the king to keep his heirs safe, be it in the madness of battle or out on a hunt. Beyond this inner circle, favored mordants see to the daily runnings of the court. Above all other mordants reign the far gulf courtiers, the greatest of which carries the title of Marquis Soph. Regents of the court, they lead the more royal mordants, and are often trusted by their king with command of the court's armies. Crypt Flayer courtiers and Crypt Hunter courtiers are field commanders, and earn titles like the Lord Marrow Broth or the Lord Liver Belch, overseeing the soldiers of the Dead Watch and the Abattoir, respectively. The The position of Lord Chambersluff is held by a Crypt Haunter courtier who rules over the lick-spittles, keeping order at court. Then there are the Marquis Wretchbile and Baron Gizzard, Cryptghast courtiers who stand as marshals for the king's massed mordant armies. Be it in the stalwart and proud ranks of the king's ghouls, or the stealthy ghoul patrol. Moggs reached into the chest cavity of the ogre and had a good rummage around. His fingers were still slipping off a clutch of organs when he felt a bony hand scrabbling for his prize. Ergoff use, Moggs spat, the strange-looking mordant hissing right back as they fought over the corpse's glistening innards. For a moment, the two ghouls cursed and clawed at each other, Moggs ready to take a chunk out of the thief's hide with his dripping fangs. Then, from above, a screeching howl echoed out across the corpse-littered battlefield, and both Mordants cowered in the dirt. Moggs was the first to look up, his red eyes growing wide with wonder as he beheld King Splinter Blood atop his stately mount, treating with another lord. Both kings looked glorious in their shining golden armor and flowing capes, their steeds circling upon the wind as each noble made a greeting. Blinking, Moggs looked over at the soldier in his unfamiliar livery, and wondered why a moment ago he had been fighting him for the ogre's loot. After all, there was plenty to go around, and had they not won this victory together? "I think we can share these spoils, can we not?" he said. "It would be an honor," the soldier replied, smiling wide and revealing small gobbets of meat stuck in his teeth. And that is where we are going to bring this video to a close. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.